three-brained beings there such an abnormality, then these terrible processes of theirs began indeed to proceed there less often and on a smaller scale. And through this, the sporadic, relatively great what is called mortality was diminished. Yet the general mortality of the three-brained beings was not only not reduced by this, but even increased, since owing to the continued progressive deterioration of their being existence, and in consequence owing to the deterioration of the quality of the radiative vibrations of their presences in the process of their existence, required from them by nature, the length of their existence on the one hand was still further diminished, and on the other hand, their what is called birth rate was increased. So it continued until that time when a certain famous Asadullah Ibrahim Ogli, a Persian dervish, who obtained his arising and who was formed into a responsible being on that same continent, turned all this in another direction. The dervish Asadullah Ibrahim Ogli began his activities there only some 30 or 40 terrestrial years ago, being simply only a fanatic of the Mohammedan religion without the serious and deeply learned knowledge possessed by the Kurd Atarnach. He perceived in the custom of sacrificial offerings only horrible injustice on the part of the people toward the beings of other forms. And he set as the aim of his existence to obtain, at whatever cost, the destruction on the earth of this, in his opinion, anti-religious custom. Having begun from that time to wander on the continent Asia, chiefly in those countries where the greater part of the three-brained beings were the followers of the Mohammedan religion, he began to work mainly through dervishes like himself, who are to be found in almost all the communities there on the continent Asia. This ingenious and energetic Persian dervish, Asadullah Ibrahim Ogli, here, there, and everywhere very cleverly persuaded these other dervishes of the truth of his idea. And these, in their turn, now everywhere persuaded the ordinary beings of the continent Asia that the destruction of the existence of beings of other forms is not only not pleasing to God, but that the destroyers would even be obliged to bear in another world, in hell, a double punishment, one for their own what are called sins, and one for the sins of the beings destroyed by them, and so on. And thanks to preachings of this kind about the other world by dervishes, considered great authorities on such questions, the beings of Asia did indeed year by year diminish their sacrificial offerings. In short, the result of all the activity of this good Persian dervish was precisely the latest great process of reciprocal destruction, or as your favorites would call it, the Great World War. And so, my boy, although the hypothesis put forward in theory of that uncommon learned Kurd Atarnach very nearly, as I have already told you, approximated to reality, yet nevertheless he failed to understand what was most important, namely, that the vibrations required by nature, which have to be formed from the radiations issuing from beings, both during their existence as well as from the process of their raskawarno, have no significance quantitatively, but only qualitatively. It is possible that the Kurd Atarnach, being an unusual terrestrial being, would have understood this also if he had known the details of the results that had been obtained after those conditions of being existence had been already more or less established on this planet, which were especially created for the three-brained beings arising there by the most saintly labors of the essence-loving, very saintly Ashiata Shiamash. During that said period, not only did their rate of mortality begin to decline, but what they call their birth rate also began to decline. Their birth rate declined because when the three-brained beings there were already existing more or less as is becoming to three-centered beings, and when the radiations issuing from them were yielding vibrations more akin to the vibrations required from them by nature, both for the most great common cosmic trogo-auto-egocrat in general, and for the maintenance of the moon and Anulios in particular. Then great nature did not fail to adapt herself to the diminishing of their birth rate. The more so, as in recent times the need for the said vibrations for the maintenance of the existence of the planet Moon had to be diminished. The aspect of this fundamental question regarding the significance of the sense and aim of the existence of your favorites is so important for the understanding of a great deal that proceeds there on earth, and by the way also of the question touching the causes of war, that I consider it necessary to refer to it once more. I first learned that the destiny of beings arising on this planet of yours is chiefly to elaborate, by means of the process of their existence, the vibrations required by nature for the maintenance of those former parts of the planet now called Moon and Anulios. When, do you remember, I became worthy personally to converse for the second time with his conformity, the then still angel but now archangel Luisos. His conformity then told me that although the movements of both former parts of the planet Earth were now already finally regulated with the general harmony of movement, and that every kind of apprehension of some or other surprise in the near future had absolutely vanished, yet to avoid any possible complications in the distant future, it had been explicitly decided by the Most High, most sacred individuals to actualize the corresponding on the planet for the formation of what is called the sacred Askokim, so that this sacred cosmic substance required for the maintenance of that planet's former parts might continuously issue from that planet. And further, His Highness also explained that this cosmic substance, the sacred Askokim, exists in general in the universe chiefly blended with the sacred substance Abrustonis and Helktonis, and hence that this sacred substance Askokim, in order to become vivifying for such a maintenance, must first be freed from the said sacred substance Abrustonis and Helktonis. To tell the truth, my boy, I did not at once clearly understand all that he then said, and it was only later that I came to understand it all clearly, when, during my studies of the fundamental cosmic laws, I learned that these sacred substances, Abrustonis and Helktonis, are just those substances by which the higher being bodies of three-brained beings, namely the body Kesdjan and the body of the soul, are in general formed and perfected. And when I learned that the separation of the sacred Askokim from the said sacred substances proceeds in general when the beings, on whatever planet it might be, transubstantiate the sacred substances Abrustonis and Helktonis in themselves, for the forming and perfecting of their higher bodies by means of conscious labors and intentional sufferings. And when I had become interested in these favorites of yours and had begun to observe and to study their strange psyche, only then did I finally understand to which end both great nature herself and the most high and most saintly individuals always patiently adapt themselves to everything. And concerning this, the following personal opinion was formed in me.